All right. Hello again, adventurers, and welcome to another exciting daily vlog. This is Daily Vlog 2025, number 114. And today, I'm still in a game design mood. So, today, we are going to answer the question: what is a summoner? So, um, this is something that in tabletop RPGs doesn't really show up. And the few times it has kind of been represented, it hasn't gone super well. So normally in these videos, I'll go through like the history of the summoner class and things like that. But if anyone hadn't realized, D&D 5th edition, there isn't a quote-unquote summoner class. In 5th edition, there are certain spells and things like that you can take that allows you to summon certain creatures. And in base 5th edition, there is a conjuration school of magic for the wizard. But to be blunt, it doesn't really work that well. And summoning spells in and of themselves have existed for a really long time. But as far as creating a class itself that's built around the idea of summoning, it just doesn't really tend to work. So where does the idea of a summoner come from? Well, in video games and things like that, it's actually kind of a common thing to have. There are even entire. There's one game in particular that fascinated me as a child because I was never able to play it. The game itself was called Summoner. And this story time. When I was young, I had a creative writing assignment in I had a creative writing assignment in my English class, and we were just supposed to write like a short fiction story. And so I had really been interested in the Summoner class from Final Fantasy V because I loved Final Fantasy V, and EverQuest, which I can't remember. I think I was just starting to get into EverQuest at that point. I can't actually remember when. But there was a lot of different. There was a lot of different kind of examples of this summoner to type character. And I remember thinking that the idea of being able to summon an elemental to kind of fight for you was the coolest thing ever. And so I wrote this entire little short story about this kid that gets isekai'd long before I knew what isekai meant into this world of magic and fantasy, and they were able to attach gems to staves that would allow them to cast certain spells, and this particular kid found out that he was just really good at kind of summoning elementals and things like that. And I just thought it was a really cool idea of a character that doesn't technically fight themselves, but they summon these little minions to do it for them. However, years later, when I started getting into tabletop RPGs, I discovered that the idea of a summoner just really isn't a thing. And again, it shows up in video games all the time. Like, one of the most popular necromancer builds in a couple different flavors of Diablo is what's called the Minion Mancer, where they just summon a bunch of skeletons and undead wizards and bone colossi and other stuff like that. And so you just have this massive army that attacks for you. And in things like Warcraft 2, human wizards could summon, I think they summoned water elementals. They could summon water elementals to fight for them. And again, in EverQuest, I think the magician class was the one that I was familiar with. And the magician class really couldn't fight. Like, they could cast spells like other spellcasters. They really weren't all that great at it. But what they could do is they could summon a bunch of different elementals that they could use to kind of augment what they were lacking. And then we get into the things like Final Fantasy XI or Final Fantasy XIV. They actually have a summoner class where you get to summon this little mini dude called I think it's an Edgy. It's been a while since I've messed around with the summoner. And depending on the one that you have summoned, they can do different things. And it's cool and it's interesting. And in tabletop RPGs, it's just not a thing. And again, there have been summoning spells and things like that, like in earlier editions of D&D, like AD&D second edition, you did have quite a few different summon creature spells. And if you go back to first edition, you had the ever popular Sticks to Snakes. So they had the ability to do it, but the reason that it generally tends to not be super, super popular in a tabletop RPG is it messes around with the action economy. When you are playing a tabletop RPG, each player is basically designated a single turn to do what they can. And when you start giving players additional actions and things that they can do, it unbalances the game depending on which system you're using. But the other thing that it does is it disincentivizes the other, or disenfranchises the other players, because their turn, they get to do, their one thing, and then this other person's turn, they get to do something, and then they also, each one of these creatures that they summon also gets to do something. And so it tends to slow down combat to a crawl. And you just feel really, really inadequate next to, a summoner to type character. It's one of the reasons why I know quite a few dungeon masters that won't allow summon spells, like summon woodland creatures and stuff like that. Not because they break the game or anything like that. Like, you can get around it, and there's tons of different ways to deal with a sudden influx of units on one side or the other. But because it makes the game not fun. It's just really, really boring for everyone else at the table, when everyone else is taking 15, maybe 20 minutes on their turn if it's a really complicated turn. And this other person is taking an hour on theirs because they have to direct an army. So the idea of a character built around summoning in a tabletop RPG just doesn't tend to be something that a lot of RPG makers want to deal with, because the balancing for it gets really, really confusing. And again, you have to create situations where the other players are not going to feel inadequate because of all the different things that the summoner can do. So we're not going to do a ton of history for this, because there really isn't a ton of history in tabletop RPGs. But we do need to start the mechanics portion of this by defining, what do I mean by a summoner? And basically what I mean by a summoner is a character who is magic-based in some way, shape, or form, that has the ability to summon or create creatures that are under the command of the summoner. And that's how they tend to interact with the world. Not purely for combat. I mean, whenever they're doing something, that's how they tend to do it. And we do have some examples from some more modern and some more classic games. Again, I brought up Record of Lodoss War, which is an anime from the 80s that was actually a retelling of a D&D campaign. One of the characters, Deedlit, was technically kind of a summoner in the idea that the way that they flavored her magic abilities was that she had these two elemental spirits that helped her. She had a fire elemental spirit and a water elemental spirit, if I remember correctly. And so she would invoke these spirits to be able to cast all of her spells and things like that. Very much kind of Mana series-esque character. So that's one way you can deal with the kind of summoning thing, is make it a purely flavor thing. Like, the mechanics are still the exact same mechanics that you're dealing with, but you flavor it as, well, you're not doing it, it's actually your summon doing that. Which is a little bit kind of cheating in my book. It's basically like saying, well, we're going to let you be a summoner, but we're not really going to let you be a summoner. And that frustrates people. It was one of the reasons why people were so frustrated with the 2014 PHB Beastmaster Ranger, because they gave you an animal companion, which is what people wanted, but the animal companion was so useless and required you to sacrifice your actions to let your companion do anything, that it wasn't really, like, you really didn't have an animal companion. You had a couple different actions you could take that were always bad. And then when we get to more modern stuff, we talk about, like, Fabula Ultima. They have a class called the Arcanist, which is effectively a summoner. And depending on which version of the Arcanist that you're using, it works in a very kind of Final Fantasy-esque summoner thing, where you merge with one of these arcana, and while it's active, it gives you a buff, and then when you dismiss it, it does something big. And then the revised version of that works very similarly, but it also gives you what's called a surge, which is basically, as long as it's active, you have an additional action that you can take. And again, from the idea of a summoner, the way that we've described it here, of you are a spellcaster or magic-based character that summons creatures to act for you, that, again, feels slightly cheat-y, but it works better than the Beastmaster Ranger example that we had. So here's the problem that you have to deal with if you're creating effectively a pet class, because pet classes are notorious in D&D and tabletop RPGs of being extremely hard to balance and being extremely game breaking. And I guess one of the interesting things about it is pet classes, quote unquote, used to be the norm, because if you go back to basic D&D and AD&D 1E, one of the things that most of the martial classes got, I think a few of the caster classes too got them, because I thought wizards could get them too, but they got what were called followers. And basically what they were is, once you got to a certain level, you could basically hire an adventurer to kind of go with you on adventures. And so you had basically another character that you got to play. They were a lower level than you. They had less things that they could do, but you basically had another character. And again, most of the martial classes got those. And like I said, I think the casters did too. It's been a real long time since I've looked into follower rules from first edition. But it was, again, it was a way to kind of make the characters still feel more powerful as they got to higher levels, without having to come up with more and more kind of crazy abilities that they would have. So yeah, old school D&D, you used to run, and you some of the classes you got hired didn't get just one follower. You could get two, three, four, and so old school D&D had the ability to kind of deal with this. But if you notice, it's not really a thing anymore. Mostly because, again, it didn't work super, super well. It wasn't horrible, and I know of a few people that actually really enjoyed the kind of follower system. Um, but it still would like bog down combat and stuff like that. So if you're designing a pet class, one of the things you have to focus on is, okay, if you're going to be adding additional characters uh, with that have their own actions and stuff like that, you have to find a way to speed up that aspect of combat, because the choice paralysis and things like that can get really, really bad if you have one character that has maybe three different minions or summons or whatever we're going to call them, and each one is basically their own character that they have to kind of figure out what they're going to do. So probably the first thing I would do from a game design perspective is for a summoner style class, what we need to start off with is any summon that they get the ability to use needs to be relatively simplistic. In the idea that when you summon them, they basically have only one or two different things that they can do, so that when it comes for their turn, they can just go, okay, I get one choice with these guys. Do I want them to attack from range or attack from melee? Or, do I want them to debuff this person or cause damage? Simple things like that where you don't have a bunch of different choices. Now, the one critique of that is going to be, well, then that's going to make it really not fun to be a summoner, because as soon as you summon something, you now don't have the ability. Well, and that's where the variety of summons comes in. In order for a system like that to work well, you need to have enough different summons that do different things, so that when combat starts, the summoner has to think, okay, I have got fire elementals, water elementals, and earth elementals, and each one does something different. Fire elementals set things on fire. That's what they do. They're damage dealers. Water elementals are more control. They can create freeze spots and freeze people in place. They can slow people down. Okay, we know that. And then earth elementals are defensive. They literally get in front of people and take hits and make it more difficult for my allies to get hit. So what do I want to focus on right now? What's going to be the most beneficial? Okay, I'm going to summon an earth elemental over here, and I'm going to summon a fire elemental over here, because I need to protect this person and I need to kill this particular creature. That's where we're going to get the fun aspect of being a summoner, is as they learn more summons and kind of collect all of these different minions or summons or whatever we want, each one is going to have a very particular purpose in combat. Outside of combat, you can let them be a little bit more free form. Because again, that will give the summoner something fun to do outside of combat. Let's say, in combat, fire elementals burn things. Outside of combat, they still burn things. But setting fire, I've got well over a decade of experience in tabletop RPGs, and I can tell you right now, fire is the true answer to everything. I have seen it over and over and over and over again. You can solve almost any problem in a TTRPG with fire. You might have to get creative with how you're using that fire, or the fire might have to also be combined with something like explosives, but fire is the answer to everything. So just giving them a little fire minion that they can kind of get off to, or summon to do a bunch of different things, will be useful. And then having an earth elemental, well, maybe the earth elemental is also really, really strong, whereas both fire and water can't actually interact with things because water will just get things wet and fire will set them on fire. So if you need to move stuff, you summon the earth elemental. And if you need to burn stuff, you summon the fire elemental. And if you need to lubricate something, that's where the water elemental, or whatever. That would make kind of an interesting character. And the kind of different variations you could come up with for subclasses or whatever you want to could basically kind of modify what kind of things that they summon. You know, an elemental summoner would do exactly that. That's our kind of standard one. Fire, water, earth, air, whatever we want to do, and different variations upon that. You might have a necromancer who's also in this kind of summoner branch because they're going to be summoning creatures, but they summon various versions of undead. So they might have zombies and skeletons and undead knights and the things like that. Again, each one having its own thing that it's designed to do, and then we just have to kind of find an overall kind of perk for each different style of magic. Like maybe necromancers have the ability to drain life. With all of their minions have the ability to somehow to drain life or things like that, and that's why you would go necromancer versus elementalist. And the elemental summoner again can actually I don't know, they can set things on fire. Like, again, everything, whenever I think of elemental spells, it's just like, they can set things on fire. That, in and of itself, that is all you need to do to give them something that makes them feel unique. Is like, wait, I can set shit on fire? Yep, you've just solved all of D&D. You just won D&D. And then perhaps the last version of a summoner would be like a nature-based summoner. So they could summon animals and plant creatures, basically kind of a pet-based druid or maybe a shaman. Because they did have, in 4th edition, they did have a shaman class that could summon creatures and minions and stuff like that. Summoning in 4th edition was weird, because they did have summoning spells that you could use. But a lot of times you had to give up your actions in order to do something with it, so it didn't quite feel as powerful. So again, in this particular version of a summoner, the summoner themselves is generally not going to be taking actions on their own. We are going to hyperfixate on the idea that no, the purpose of the summoner is to summon things and command them to do things. And the way we're going to get around, well, then that kind of makes it feel kind of bad for me to play, because now it's just my minions doing stuff. Well, by giving them multiple minions, because that generally was the downfall of summoning in 4th edition, was you generally could only have one thing summoned. I think there was a few spells that were very, very limited that would allow you to summon a couple different things, but for the most part it was just one thing. And there wasn't a single class that was built entirely around summoning, and so you still had this entire other kit of stuff that you could do in addition to your summoning, and so that was always the problem. For this particular class that we're designing here, the only thing that they're going to be doing is summoning creatures, and each different creature is going to give them different abilities and allow them to be more tactical and things like that. And then as the summoner levels up, one of the things that you can do to make them feel more powerful is just give them more creatures that they're allowed to have simultaneously. Again, by limiting the creatures to one or two basic actions, adding an additional one or two to the battlefield is not going to make a massive difference, especially if you start off the summoner as being able to summon. Maybe just they start off with you can only have 2 summons at any given point. So by the time they start getting 3, 4, 5, they've already been playing the class long enough that they've figured out kind of how to pilot these different minions or summons or whatever we're calling them. And so you don't have that kind of choice paralysis problem, except when they first initially summon them. Obviously, there would need to be some kind of cost associated with the summoning. It could be a concentration style thing, where in order to have the summon up, you can only focus on having them up for a certain number of them up at any given time, and anytime you take damage or anytime something happens, there's a chance that you might lose one out. You can also go the more kind of traditional route of anytime you summon something, it costs a limited resource, a spell slot, magic points, however you want to deal with it. I think both ideas have merit and both ideas could work. It depends on how you've built your magic system up until that point. And then, from that point on, again, the hardest thing about designing a summoner class is going to be ensuring that there's enough summons that the choices of the things that they can summon actually matter. I've mentioned this before. Anytime you give a player a choice when they're leveling up or something like that, if like this happens in quite a few 5th edition classes and subclasses, where what they'll do is they'll say, okay, well, this is your little a la carte board that you can pick from. When you level up, you can pick anything from this a la carte board. If you give them additional choices from that same board going forward, as they pick more and more of these things, they become less valuable. Like, let's say that you have at like level 2, you have a choice of 5 different things that you can pick from. But as you level up the character, you eventually get to pick 3 more. So you get a grand total of 4 out of the 5 things on this board you're going to get. Well, that means at level 2, you're going to pick, in your mind, the most powerful of those things. And then each subsequent pick is going to be, well, the next most powerful. And as you're getting to that last pick, it's basically, okay, which one of these do I like the least? In a situation like that, I generally recommend, bare minimum, they need to have double the number of picks as they will ever be able to make choices. So if they get a total of 4 over the lifetime of the class, you need to have a minimum of 8 choices for them. It's best if you can triple it, so having 12 choices, because then it's never a choice of, well, which of these is the least bad to me. It's always going to be, ooh, which one of these do I like the most? So getting back to the summoner, you are going to have to create quite a few kind of different flavors of these summons, which is going to take some time. But it should create a pretty interesting, fun class to play. And then as they level up, they can get kind of stronger versions of those things. They can do more things, but might cost a little bit more, and other stuff like that. Or maybe they have like an upgrade path for each one of their summons, where at certain levels, like your fire elemental can specialize in area attacks or single target attacks, or your earth elemental can, focus on either being able to protect more people, or being able to change the environment to make it more difficult for enemies to get to your allies. Things like that. Those are all things that would still make the class feel very unique, would give the players lots of choices, and again, by still limiting their abilities to, maybe 1 or 2 choices with a couple extra effects built into them, you're not going to be bogging down combat, making everyone else feel kind of stupid for not taking that particular class. So, yeah, like I said, I like the idea of a summoner. I just don't know of any tabletop RPG where I've seen it executed particularly well. And I think this idea, if it was implemented in a tabletop RPG, could work really well and would create a really, really fun class to play. But I'm interested to hear from you guys. Do you guys think that this summoner that we've kind of created here, do you think that would be a fun class to play? Do you think it would fall into the same problem of, no, it'd just be a pain in the ass for the GM and really boring for the other players? Are there other ideas of summoners that you can think of, like maybe a Final Fantasy X version of a summoner, where instead of summoning an additional creature, they basically replace their character with the summon? That could be things too. Again, let me know in the comments down below what you guys think. Otherwise, again, it's going to be all for me today. I will see you guys next time. All right? Bye-bye.